All right, chapter 12, part 2. A dog started barking off in the distance. August waited for it to stop, then said, I started working for Deborah's mother in 1931. Deborah was 4 years old, the cutest child, but always into something. I mean, a real handful. For one thing, she used to walk in her sleep. One night, she walked outside and climbed a ladder the Riffers had left leaning against the house. Her sleepwalking nearly drove her mother crazy. She laughed. And your mother had an imaginary friend. You ever had one? I shook my head. She called hers Tika T. She would talk to her out loud like she was standing right there in front of us. And if I forgot to set a place for Tika T at the table, Deborah would throw a fit. Once in a while, though, I'd set a place and she'd say, What are you doing? Tika T's not here. She's off starring in the movies. Your mother loved Shirley Temple. Tika T, I said, wanting to feel that on my tongue. That Tika T was something, August said. Whatever Deborah struggled with, Tika T could do it perfectly. Tika T made hundreds on her school papers, got gold stars in Sunday school, made her bed, cleaned her plate. People told your grandmother, Sarah was her name, that she had to take Deborah to this doctor in Richmond who specialized in children with problems. But I told her, don't worry about it. She's just working things out her own way. She'll grow out of it. She'll grow out of Tika T in time. And she did. Where had I been that I didn't know about imaginary friends? I could see the point of it. How a lost part of yourself steps out and reminds you who you could be with a little work. Doesn't sound like me and my mother were anything alike, I said. Oh, but you were. She had a streak in her like you do. Suddenly she would up and do something other girls wouldn't dream of. Like what? August stared over my shoulder and smiled. One time she ran away from home. I can't even remember what she was upset about. We looked for her long past dark, found her curled up in a drainage ditch, sound asleep. The dog had started barking again, and August grew quiet. We listened like it was some kind of serenade while I sat with my eyes closed, trying to picture my mother asleep in a ditch. After a while, I said, How long did you work for my grandmother? A good long time, over 9 years. Until I got that teaching job I told you about. We still kept up after I left, though. I bet they hated it when you moved down here to South Carolina. Poor Deborah cried and cried. She was 19 by then, but she cried like she was 6. The swing had slowed to a stop, and neither one of us had thought to rev it back up. How did my mother get down here? I'd been here 2 years, August said. Started my own honey business, and June was teaching school when I got a long-distance phone call from her. She was crying her eyes out, saying her mother had died. I don't have anybody left but you, she kept saying. What about her father? Where was he? Oh, Mr. Fontenelle died when she was a baby. I never even met him. So she moved down here to be with you? Deborah had a friend from high school who'd just moved to Sylvan. She was the one who convinced Deborah it was a good place to be. Told her there were jobs and men back from the war, so Deborah moved. I think it was a lot because of me, though. I think she wanted me nearby. The dots were all starting to connect. My mother came to Sylvan, I said. Met T-Ray and got married? That's right, August said. When we'd first come out onto the porch, the sky had been clotted with stars, the Milky Way shining like an actual road you could walk down and find your mother standing at the end of it with her hands on her hips. But now a damp fog rolled into the yard and settled over the porch. A minute later, a light rain fell out of it. I said, the part I will never figure out is why she married him. I don't think your father was always like he is now. Deborah told me about him. She loved the fact that he was decorated in the war. He was so brave, she thought, that he treated her like a princess. I could have laughed in her face. This isn't the same Terrence Ray, I can tell you that right now. You know, Lily, people can start out one way, and by the time life gets through with them, they end up completely different. I don't doubt he started off loving your mother. In fact, I think he worshipped her, and your mother soaked it up. Like a lot of young women, she could get carried away with romance. But after 6 months or so, it started wearing off. One of her letters talked about Terrence Ray having dirt under his fingernails. I remember that. Next thing I knew, she was writing to me about how she didn't know if she could live way out there on the farm, that kind of thing. When he proposed, she said no. But she married him, I said, genuinely confused. Later on, she changed her mind and said yes. Why? I said. If the love had worn off, why did she marry him? August cupped her hand on the back of my head and smoothed my hair with my fingers. I've thought hard about whether I should tell you, but maybe it'll help you understand everything that happened a lot better. Honey, Deborah was pregnant, that's why. The instant before she said it, I knew what was coming, but still, her words fell like a hammer. She was pregnant with me? My voice sounded tired saying the words. My mother's life was too heavy for me. That's right, pregnant with you. She and Terrence Ray got married around Christmas time. She called long distance to tell me. Unwanted, I thought. I was an unwanted baby. Not only that, my mother had gotten stuck with T-Ray because of me. I was glad it was dark, so August couldn't see my face, how bent in it was. You think you want to know something, and then once you do, all you can think about is erasing it from your mind. From now on, when people ask me what I wanted to be when I grew up, I plan to say amnesiac. What does that mean, amnesiac? It comes from the word amnesia. So if you have amnesia, what does that mean? Look that one up if you don't know. I listened to the hiss of rain. The spray floated over and misted my cheeks while I counted on my fingers. I was born 7 months after they got married. She called me right after you were born. She said you were so pretty it hurt her eyes to look at you. Something about this caused my own eyes to sting like sand had flown into them. Maybe my mother had cooed over me after all, made embarrassing baby talk, twirled my newborn hair like the top of an ice cream cone, done it up with pink bows. Just because she didn't plan on having me didn't mean she hadn't loved me. August went on talking while I leaned back into the familiar story I've always told myself, the one about my mother loving me beyond reason. I'd lived inside it the way a goldfish lives in its bowl, as if that was the only world there was. Leaving it would be the death of me. I sat there with my shoulders slumped, staring at the floor. I would not think the word unwanted. Are you all right? August said. You want to go to bed now and sleep on all this? Talk about the rest in the morning? No, burst out of my lips. I took a breath. I'm fine, really, I said, trying to sound unruffled. I just need some more water. She took my empty glass and went to the kitchen, looking back twice at me. When she returned with the water, she had a red umbrella hooked over her wrist. In a little while, I'll walk you over to the honey house, she said. As I drank, the glass shook in my hand, and the water would hardly go down. The sound of swallowing in my throat grew so loud it blotted out the rain for several seconds. Are you sure you don't want to go to bed now? August asked. I'm sure. I need to know. You need to know what, Lily? Everything, I said. August settled herself beside me on the swing, resigned. All right, then, she said. All right. I know she only married him because of me, but do you think she was just a little bit happy? I asked. I think for a while she was. She tried, I know that. I got a dozen or so letters and at least that many phone calls from her, spread out over the first couple of years. And I could see she was making an effort. Mostly, she wrote about you. How you were sitting up, taking your first steps, playing patty cake. But then her letters came less and less often. And when they did come, I could tell she was unhappy. One day she called me up. It was the end of August or 1st of September. I remember because we'd had Mary Day not long before that. She said she was leaving T-Ray, that she had to leave home. She wanted to know if she could stay with us here for a few months till she figured out where to go. Of course, I said that would be fine. When I picked her up at the bus station, she didn't even look like herself. She'd gotten so thin and had these dark circles under her eyes. My stomach did a slow roll. I knew we'd come to the place in the story I feared the most. I began to breathe very fast. I was with her when you picked her up at the bus station. She brought me along, didn't she? August leaned over and whispered against my hair. No, honey. She came by herself. I realized I'd bitten the skin inside my cheek. The taste of blood made me want to spit, but I swallowed it instead. Why? I said, why didn't she bring me? All I know, Lily, is that she was depressed, kind of falling apart. The day she left home, nothing unusual happened. She just woke up and decided she couldn't be there anymore. She called a lady from the next farm to babysit, and she drove Terrence Ray's truck to the bus station. Up until she got here, I thought she'd be bringing you with her. The swing groaned while we sat there smelling warm rain, wet wood, rotted grass. My mother had left me. I hate her, I said. I meant to shout it, but it came out unnaturally calm, low and raspy like the sound of cars crunching slowly over gravel. Now hold on, Lily. I do. I hate her. She wasn't anything like I thought she was. I'd spent my life imagining all the ways she'd loved me, what a perfect specimen of a mother she was, and all of it was lies. I had completely made her up. It was easy for her to leave me, because she never wanted me in the first place, I said. August reached for me, but I got to my feet and pushed open the screen door leading to the porch steps. I let it slam behind me, then sat on the rain-sopped steps, hunched up under the eave. I heard August move across the porch, felt the air thicken as she stood behind me on the other side of the screen. I'm not making to make excuses for her, Lily, she said. Your mother did what she did. Some mother, I said. I felt hard inside, hard and angry. Will you listen to me for a minute? When your mother got here to Turberon, she was practically skin and bone. May couldn't get her to eat a thing. All she did was cry for a week. Later on, we called it a nervous breakdown, but while it was happening, we didn't know what to call it. I took her to the doctor here, and he gave her some cod liver oil and asked where her white family was. He said maybe she needed to spend some time on Bull Street, so I didn't take her back to him again. Bull Street? The mental institution? The story was getting worse by the minute. But that's for crazy people, I said. I guess he didn't know what else to do for her, but she wasn't crazy. She was depressed, but not crazy. You should have let him put her in there. I wish she'd rotted there. Lily! I'd shocked her, and I was glad. My mother had been looking for love, and instead she'd found T-Ray and the farm, and then me, and I had not been enough for her. She'd left me with T-Ray Owens. The sky was split by a zigzagged path of lightning, but even then I didn't move. My hair blew like smoke in every direction. I felt my eyes harden, grow flat and narrow as pennies. I stared at a dollop of bird shit on the bottom step, the way the rain was smearing it into the crevices of wood. Are you listening now? August said. Her voice sifted through the screen, little barbed wire tips on every word. Are you? I hear you. Depressed people do things they wouldn't ordinarily do. Like what? I said. Abandon their children? I couldn't stop. The rain spattered my sandals, dripped between my toes. Letting out a loud breath, August walked back to the swing and sat down. It seemed like maybe I'd hurt her, disappointed her, and something about that punched a hole in me. Some of my pridefulness drained out. I eased off the steps and went back inside onto the screened porch. As I sat down beside her on the swing, she laid her hand on mine, and the heat flowed out from the palm into my skin. I shuddered. Come here, she said, pulling me over to her. It was like being swept under a bird's wing, and that's how we stayed for a while, rocking back and forth with me tucked under there. What made her so depressed like that? I said. I don't know the whole answer, but part of it was being out on the farm, isolated from things, married to a man she really didn't want to be married to. We're going to stop there for today.